this week about whether Islam and democracy are compatible. This is Under an Hour.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hillsdale College. For our new guests, let me introduce myself. My name is Tim Kaspar. I'm the Director of Seminars here at Hillsdale College. We're glad to have all of you with us tonight. As I was walking over this afternoon with Sheikh Kabani to his talk, the Sheikh suggested that somehow Islam means democracy, or that democracy is somehow contained within Islam. And he reaffirmed this in his talk, I think, this afternoon, for those of you who were present for that. Well, tonight we have a speaker with us who can speak firsthand about the relationship of democracy and Islam. But before we get to her talk, we'll have a few remarks from Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn, who's going to make a few remarks. And let me say before he comes up, I have just two quick housekeeping announcements, which are I was just asked during the Q&A session, we do have a microphone and we are recording this, so if you could just wait for the microphone before you ask your question and stand up, that would be a big help to us. And as always, we'll look to our students first, and if they're too shy, then we'll look elsewhere for questions. So now let me invite to the podium Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn.
I impose myself upon you for two reasons. The first is we have a guest of really extraordinary distinction here tonight, and the second is that she has wrecked my day. I think the 20-minute segment has not gone past in my day when somebody did not call my office to exclaim to me how charming is the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. And I got so tired of hearing of it that I was sure when I met her I would dislike her. But it happens that I do not. Down at the Hillsdale Academy, where she showed up unannounced and wishing no honors done her, but just to talk and see what was down there, they asked me to deliver the official invitation for her to come back in the morning so they can make over her. But that's been going on all day. I want her to know that she's welcome. As is known here widely, 160 years ago, our college was founded by followers of Christ in the Free Will Baptist Church. In the opening sentence of our first document, they commit themselves, first of all, to the cause of civil and religious freedom. That means the right of every man and every woman in every place to worship God as every man and every woman in every place thinks right. This is a moral right, as our founders thought of it, written in the nature of the human being. Prime Minister Bhutto is welcome because she's so charming and friendly and warm. I say, you know, if she applied for the president of this college, I'd be packing in a week. But Don't get any ideas. But apart from her personality and her character, which are fine, there's this thing she wrote. Proclaims it first all the time. You can't look up anything about her without finding it. Pakistan was envisioned to be a free country where supremacy of the Constitution, rule of law, and respect for human rights were to reign supreme. She mourns that her country does not enjoy those rights today. She's a Muslim woman who grew up in a Muslim country and practices that faith today. But in writing that sentence, she could have been one of the founders of our college. It is a special thing to have her here, and someone better qualified, or at least certainly of the opinion that she's better qualified to introduce her than I. Stephanie Zimmerman will now introduce her.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Zimmerman, and I'm a junior here at Hillsdale College. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you this evening's speaker, Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Ms. Bhutto was raised in Pakistan and educated at Radcliffe College and Oxford University. Prime Minister Bhutto returned to Pakistan and served as leader of the Pakistan's People Party from 1977 to 1988. After being imprisoned and then exiled, she returned to Pakistan and was elected Prime Minister at the age of 35. Following 20 months in office, she led the opposition in the National Assembly for 3 years until she was re-elected in 1993. During the 3 years of her second term as Prime Minister, her government embarked on various educational initiatives and sponsored a rural electrification program. She also privatized and deregulated most of the major industries in her country and institutionalized macroeconomic reform. She currently serves as the leader of the Pakistan's People Party in opposition to the National Assembly. She is the author of 2 books, Foreign Policy in Perspective and Daughter of Destiny, an autobiography. Prime Minister Bhutto and her husband have 1 son and 2 daughters. Would you all please join me in welcoming this evening's distinguished guest, Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto.
Thank you very much. Thank you, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting very spoiled here at Hillsdale. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is a very different place from what we had dreamt of in those wonderful moments when the Berlin Wall fell and the Cold War ended. The era of peace for which we prayed became a time of war. Civility was replaced with brutality. Tolerance was replaced by terrorism. Democracy in Pakistan is now threatened with dictatorship. This is a difficult, extraordinary, and very dangerous time. The war against terrorism, triggered by the catastrophe of September 11th, is in a new, ambiguous, and difficult phase. The senseless execution of the Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl underscored the lack of rules of these terrorist warriors. The reality of suicide bombers has for the first time struck my country. Christian churches, Muslim mosques, urban hotels, foreign consulates, and Western journalists are all targets, and scores were brutally murdered. Simultaneously, the nuclear-armed nations of Pakistan and India stand close to war once again over the disputed area of Jammu and Kashmir. And in Pakistan, a military dictatorship once again rules with an iron fist, crushing dialogue, debate, and democracy. This is not the way I had hoped the new millennium would begin, but life has its own plan. I come here tonight to address the new realities and find opportunity in this phase of tragedy. But at the outset, and on a personal note, I wish once again to express my heartfelt condolences to the people of this great nation on the savage attacks against you. As made clear over the last year, the vast majority of the people of Pakistan join with me in expressing our sorrow and grief to you. We wish you to be strong and we wish you to be proud, for you are the beacon of the light of democracy for all civilized people on this planet. Ladies and gentlemen, it's difficult to shake the haunting image of the Twin Towers and 3,000 innocent victims collapsing under the weight of hate. It is an image that shapes everything that comes after it, politically, emotionally, and morally. I feel America's pain. 4 of the happiest years of my life were spent in an American campus on the East Coast at Harvard University, where I first learned of freedom. I flourished in America's freedom, its tolerance, pluralism, openness, and equal opportunity for all its citizens. My commitment to freedom was nourished here in this land of hope and opportunity. Your nation and its dream was a hope and is a hope for me and for all men and women denied human dignity across the world. The microcosm of America that was destroyed on September 11th, people of all races, ethnicities, and religions, is everything the extremists abhor. Men and women working side by side as equals. Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Hindus together and indistinguishable, building worldwide trade and communications. America is a symbol of what can be to millions of oppressed people all over the world. America is everything those deprived of human rights and the rule of law wish for but do not have. America symbolizes modernity, diversity, and democracy. And it is modernity, diversity, and democracy which are the fanatics' worst fears. At this time of continuing crisis, the American people and American leaders must understand those who would use violence and terror in the name of Islam. They are heretics and hypocrites. They are criminals, not clerics. Their actions contradict the teachings of the Holy Prophet of Islam, who wrote, "Whenever the Prophet of God sent forth a detachment, he said to it, 'Do not cheat or commit treachery, nor should you mutilate or kill children, women, or old men.'" And there is a specific prohibition in Islamic law that bans killing by stealth and targeting a defenseless victim in a way intended to cause terror in a society. Ladies and gentlemen, it thus grieves me further that included in the list of the innocent victims of the perfidy of September 11th is the image of Islam across the world. Our religion is not what these people preach. In fact, it is the opposite. Islam is committed to tolerance and equality, and it is committed by Quranic definition to the principles of democracy. It is ironic that despite the strong commitment to democracy in Islam, most Muslims today are living in dictatorships. The Muslim people want freedom, and they need support in search of they need support in their search for political, economic, and social empowerment. Much as the people of the communist world were, so too the Muslim people are hostages in authoritarian regimes that flourished during the days of the Cold War. In the West, there is often talk about the Muslim street. The street you sometimes see on the televisions is a street of fanaticism whipped into a frenzy. But there is another Muslim street that Western governments don't often see. It is a silent street of women who are discriminated against in every aspect of life. It is a silent street of students who are not educated. It is a silent street of businessmen and women who are not allowed to freely compete. It is a silent street of human rights activists who are jailed, and of political parties that are decimated, of political leaders who are either political prisoners or political exiles. It is the street of the people, constrained by the authoritarian powers of the state. It is the street of the future, in the chains of the powers of intolerance, ignorance, and dictatorship. And it is a street far more likely to explode than the street of the marginal religious extremists. As I said, in Islam, dictatorship is never condoned, nor is cruelty condoned. In fact, according to Islam, those who commit cruel acts are condemned to destruction. Irrespective of the ignorance often demonstrated to Islam by some, and the political manipulation often shamefully practiced by fanatics, there are several key concepts in Islam that play a substantive role in the development of democracy. These include the three principles of consultation, known as shura, consensus, known as ijma, and independent judgment, known as ijtihad. In this, the 21st century, the Muslim people are searching for freedoms that exist in other parts of the world. They're searching for societies that can be representative and accountable, and which they can determine for themselves. Too few are the Muslim nations where people can be free. While Christians and Jews have the Bible to guide them, Muslims have the Holy Quran to seek guidance from. The Quran makes it clear that the principal operations of the democratic process, consultation between the elected officials and the people, and accountability of leaders to the people they serve are fundamental to Islam. The Holy Book says that Islamic society is contingent on mutual advice through mutual discussions on an equal footing. Consultation under the Quran demands that public decisions are made by representative personalities. Consensus provides the basis for majority rule. And according to Muslim scholars, the legitimacy of the state depends upon the extent to which state organization and power reflect the will of the Muslim people. Now, this is the exact opposite of the fanatical, ignorant message that is spread by the Talibans and spread by the Bin Ladens and their allies in hate. These despots are the enemies of all civilizations. The terrorists who attacked America were not fighting for Islam. They were fighting for themselves. Their goal is to establish interlinked theocracies of ignorance that they can control for their own political ends. They are the enemies of Western values, and they are the enemies of all humanity. In the end, they will be defeated. And just as not only arms and weapons defeated communism, the terrorists will be destroyed by basic and universal human nature. In the words of the former Czech President Havel, in his essay entitled The End of the Modern Era, I quote, "Communism was not defeated by military force, but by the human spirit, by conscience, by the resistance of man to manipulation. Terrorism and fanaticism will fail unless we fall into the psychopath's trap." Professor Samuel Huntington of Harvard wrote of an inevitable clash of civilization between the West and the Islamic world. Ladies and gentlemen, this clash is far from inevitable unless we make it so. There are many similarities between Islam and the Judeo-Christian traditions. These three great religions were born in the cradle of the Middle East. The word Muslim actually means those who believe in the prophethood of Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. This is why the British, during their rule of Muslim countries, did not call Muslims Muslims, but called them Mohammedans instead. According to the Islamic belief, all humanity is descended from Adam and Eve. Islam agrees that paradise ended when Eve tempted Adam with the forbidden fruit. In the Holy Book, Abraham is our father. He built the holiest place of the Muslims, known as the Kaaba, or the house of God, with his son Ismail, from whom the Muslims believe they are descended. After building the Kaaba, God asked Abraham what he wanted as a reward, and Abraham replied that many prophets should be born to my family. Abraham's sons were Isaac and Ismail. Muslims believe that Christians and Jews are descended from Isaac, while they are descended from the brother of Isaac, namely Ismail. So we are all sons and daughters of Abraham. Muslims accept the prophets of Judaism and Christianity as their own prophets. They accept the holy book of the Jews and the Christians as their own holy books, believing that the messages of God were sent through generations, through different prophets, to show humanity the path of redemption, and that Muhammad was the last prophet sent by God. Muslims believe in the day of judgment, when Jesus and Muhammad will come to receive all souls who will sit up from their graves. The Quran has a chapter on Mary, the mother of Jesus, whose Arabic name is Maryam. As in Christianity, the Quran speaks of the miraculous birth of Jesus and of his healing powers. It quotes the infant Jesus saying in his cradle, "God commanded me to pray and to give alms so long as I live and to cherish my mother." Muslims believe that paradise lies at the feet of the mother. The Christian king of Abyssinia, Negus, gave refuge to the Muslims, believing that only a slim line separated them from Christians. When the Prophet Muhammad fled from Mecca, he was given refuge by the Jews of Medina. So too did Muslims give refuge to the Jews when they were persecuted in Europe. Muslims believe that Jews, Christians, and Muslims are one people who are Ahl-e Kitab, or people of the book, having the message sent by God through his prophets. Contrary to what fanatics preach, Islam preaches the importance of knowledge. The first word of the Quran is read, while the Prophet of Islam exhorted his followers to go far and wide in search of knowledge and education. But how much knowledge and education do we really see in Muslim societies today? Many of the teachings of Islam are similar to Judaism and Christianity. Islam says, do not commit adultery, do not cheat, do not kill your children for fear of poverty, do not lie, do not spy, do not speak ill of anyone, do not gamble, do not hate or envy each other. Like other great religions, Islam is a moral compass for its followers that gives faith and hope and offers a path for the redemption of the soul on the day of judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, September 11th will go down in history as a defining moment in our civilization. The attack on the World Trade Towers was a second Pearl Harbor that ended one period in time and heralded the beginning of another. On that fateful day, the world tumbled out of a time when communism was the threat, the fear, the block that was to be contained. The world tumbled into a different period of time when Islam and the Muslim nations seemingly replaced communism as the new threat, the new fear, and the new world that was to be contained. In the 1 year since the world shook with the shock of America attacked, much has changed. Civil liberties suffered a setback. Many Muslims in America today live in terror of being hauled up on suspicion and taken away. Individual choice is now constrained. Some Muslims shave their beards and change their attire to avoid hate crimes. The World Trade Center attacks shook the West, but it also shook the Muslim world. Almost every Muslim country joined the war against terror. They sympathized with America and the American people. And many Muslims today wonder why, given their solidarity with America and their condemnation of Osama and his men, so many view them with suspicion. And I would say that this is a time to distinguish between those who commit crimes in the name of religion and those who belong to a community that wishes to live in peace and harmony with other religions. It would be a tragedy if suspicions towards Muslims led to a backlash that created a clash of civilizations. Osama and his men use commercial airliners as bombs against cities to provoke the clash of civilizations through which they hope to thrive. Their unprecedented crime against humanity has created a new global chessboard. All 19 of the hijackers that hit the World Trade Center were Arabs. That Arab countries could have produced men who could launch such an attack makes them the center of scrutiny in the 21st century. Whether one likes it or not, for the coming decades, the Muslims in general and the Arab nations in particular will be watched and contained as carefully were the communist countries in the days of the Cold War. This has triggered a growing siege mentality within the Muslim world, and a change is clearly visible 1 year since that fateful day last September. Then the Muslim world rallied around the United States as it led the war against terror. Now many in the Muslim world are moving away from the new objectives set by the United States as part of the war against terror. 1 year ago, the Iraqi regime of President Saddam was isolated. This year, it rejoined the Arab world in a summit held in Lebanon. At the summit, embraces replaced distances. President Bush has repeatedly stated that his goal is to preempt danger to the world community and to America in particular through regime change in Iraq. But many in the Muslim world remain unconvinced. Many see an attack on Iraq presaging a wider attack against an array of Muslim countries, including Iran, Syria, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and perhaps even Pakistan. Today, the intellectual opinion in the Muslim and non-Muslim world is on different courses. Many intellectuals in the United States see the Arab Muslim countries as failed nations that gave birth to evil men who could plan the cold-blooded murder of 3,000 innocents in New York, in Washington, and Pennsylvania. And although most Muslim intellectuals condemn the attacks on the World Trade Center, they believe that unaddressed political problems provided the atmosphere for evil to be born, and that a more peaceful world can thrive when the unsolved political issues are resolved. America has emerged stronger from the day of tragedy when airliners crashed into skyscrapers. It united as a nation. It rallied round the flag, remembering the dead, remembering the brave, and sharing the sorrow, as well as the determination never to let it happen again. President Bush provided the leadership that gave comfort to the American people when they were attacked and when fears of fresh attacks proliferated. The huge military response as well as the domestic measures, saved the American people from further attacks. Washington is determined to keep up its guard, and Muslim countries everywhere pray it succeeds. Muslims know that an attack by fanatics could easily increase their own vulnerability. Yet a military response is only part of the solution. Some American leaders recognize this. President Carter's National Security Advisor, Mr. Brzezinski, is quoted to have said, lurking behind a terrorist attack is a specific political antecedent. There is no grievance, though, that could justify the senseless killing of innocent people. No religion permits such senseless killing. Those who planned September 11th were evil. The concern is that the evil of some men now threatens to taint otherwise good men and women within the Muslim world, unless there is an agreement that terrorism knows no religion, no sect, no people, no culture, and no civilization. The United States is a great country that invokes great admiration in much of the Muslim world. At this time of trial, the American people could remember that the Muslim people are with them in condemning the events of September 11th. The bombing of Afghanistan and the continuing violence in the Middle East and Kashmir is impacting upon the streets in the Islamic world. No one knows when masses can become a mob. So far, the demonstrations in the Muslim world have remained few and far between. Most Muslims recognize that America was wrongly targeted and that it has a right to self-defense, a right to pursue the criminals that planned the bombings and trained and harbored the terrorists. The concern is that with a broader conflict within the Muslim world, mob fury could develop, focusing on foreign targets. The attack on the American embassy in Iran during the time of Ayatollah Khomeini, when American hostages were taken, is an example. The burning of the American embassy in Islamabad under General Zia is another. Fanatics would love nothing better than to provoke a clash of civilization, venting itself on foreign targets. Today, America is a superpower. It has a righteous cause. Its military power is awesome. Frankly, it has little need of any other country in planning an action or taking a measure to defend itself and to defend its people. The rest of the world must acquiesce. The righteousness of the American cause is giving it a moral purpose that makes unilateral action an alternative. There is, though, the great American President Woodrow Wilson, who promoted the concept of collective security and the principle of self-determination. The war against terror is a righteous cause. 1 year later, the need to prevent it from turning into a clash of civilizations is also righteous. It is this fire of clash of cultures that the extremists fuel. They want the people of America to actually believe that this is a holy war between Islam and the West. I'm here to tell you that Muslim countries and the people in Muslim countries share the same dreams as many people here in the West do. I'm not unfamiliar with the people who want this clash of cultures. I know them well. I know how they operate. I had to stand up to them when I was Prime Minister of Pakistan. I had to battle with many of these same extremists, including Osama bin Laden. During the Afghan-Soviet War, my country had become the breeding ground for their political, religious manipulation and exploitation. They preached a message that enslaves. They taught children to hate. They kept people helpless and bitter. My government closed their so-called universities. We disarmed the sham primary schools. We tried to restore law and order to our cities, which were under attack from the terrorists. My government hunted down and extradited the terrorists like Ramzi Youssef, who had exported death and destruction to New York in the 1990s. And the terrorists struck back at me and my allies. They destroyed the Egyptian embassy in Islamabad. They burnt our National Assembly, hijacked school buses, gunned down diplomats and businessmen. But we took them on with our eyes open. And because we did, There was not a single act of international terror during my 2 terms as Prime Minister of Pakistan. The 2 attacks on the World Trade Center, the attacks on the 2 US embassies in Africa, the attack on the coal ship in Yemen, the attack on the Indian Parliament, the Bombay blast, all these attacks took place when the Pakistan People's Party and I were in opposition. So I know these fanatics, and I know they wait for their opportunity to strike, and that one must never let down one's guard. And also, one must never give in. One must not let fear stand in the way of justice. That's exactly what they want. We saw it in the rantings of bin Laden, rejoicing at the murder of innocents. Ladies and gentlemen, these murderers' greatest fear is the spread of information, social equality, and democracy. These are the 3 principles that choke off the oxygen of terrorism. And it was in the clusters of information, social equality, and democracy that I devoted my time and attention as Prime Minister of Pakistan. And I did so by heralding in the information revolution in Pakistan. We introduced fax machines, digital pages, optic fiber, cellular telephones. People had to wait 20 years to get a telephone in Pakistan before our government was formed. But cellular telephones and satellite dishes, computers, internet, and of course even CNN and Fox into Pakistan. We integrated into the global economy that the fanatics so fear. Pakistan became one of the 10 emerging capital markets of the world, with billions of dollars coming in investment from the United States and from other countries of the world. We eradicated polio in our country and dramatically reduced infant mortality. We brought down the population growth rate by establishing women's health clinics in thousands of communities across our country. We appointed women judges to our nation's benches for the first time in our history. And we established a women's bank where only women could work and where only women could get credit, although we did allow the men to keep their money in there too. It was a transformation of a society that attacked ignorance and illiteracy and injustice. It was a transformation that was bringing Pakistan into the modern era as a model to all 1 billion Muslims around the world of what moderate, enlightened Islam could accomplish for its people. And so to the fanatics and the extremists, we became the enemy, the threat, and the obstacle. To Islam, at the crossroads, a moderate Pakistan was one fork in the road, fanaticism and ignorance the other. I am proud of my record as Prime Minister in containing international terrorism and reducing tension with India. We had extraordinary progress with India by signing the first and only nuclear confidence-building treaty between our 2 countries, the treaty not to attack each other's nuclear facilities. But moderation and progress is not what the army, hardliners, and religious extremists could tolerate. I was their threat. My government was destabilized. The Taliban then took over all of Afghanistan, invited in Al-Qaeda after my overthrow, and began training and recruiting people and also declaring war against the civilized world. And since my overthrow, 3 times India and Pakistan have come to the brink of a potentially nuclear catastrophe. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes tragedy leads to resurrection of hope and spirit. The alliance headed by the United States has met effective retribution against the Taliban, who have been routed. But this is only the success of phase 1. Phase 2 is still there. And we must remember the lessons of history and not make the mistakes of the past. Because Osama bin Laden did not emerge like whole cloth from a nightmare. His depravity was long in the making. For in the closing days of the occupation, the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, I had cautioned the US policymakers that the defeat of the Soviets had empowered and emboldened the extremist elements of the Afghan Mujahideen at the expense of the moderates. The policy of standing up against Soviet aggression was right. It was noble. But the early decisions to arm, train, and supply and legitimize the most extreme fanatics sowed the seeds for the 21st century terrorism that we see swirling around us. Our two governments, with other governments, worked well to defeat the Soviets. Our deficiency was our inability to plan for a post-war Afghanistan built on democratic principles of coalition, consensus, and cooperation. The fundamental mistake which contributed to a long-term calamity, in my view, was that we were not consistently committed to the values of freedom, democracy, and self-determination that undermine the forces of terrorism. America must not repeat that mistake again. Democracy and human rights must be the centerpiece of US policy at home and abroad. Just as democracies do not make war against other democracies, democracies also do not sponsor international terrorism. The party that I am proud to lead supports the decision of the Pakistani military regime to stand shoulder to shoulder with the United States in the civilized world's dark hour. America need not coddle dictators to promote its interests. America's interest is democracy, not tyranny. In Pakistan, just as in America and around the world, those of us who are committed to human rights and democracy abhor terrorism in all its murderous forms. At this time of political crisis in Pakistan, I urge America, I urge the government of the United States and its people to stand for your values and to stand for your principles and not acquiesce to tyranny in the name of stability. Let us remember that building a stable, moderate Afghanistan could have marginalized the Taliban and the Osamas of this world before they unleashed their war against the people of the United States. The goal of US policy must always be to simultaneously promote stability and strengthen democratic values. The military dictator of Pakistan has been ambiguous to the opposition in his opposition to terrorism. He has given mixed signals at home and around the world. Last month, his regime appointed a deputy attorney general whose son died fighting for Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The brother of his civilian chief of staff belongs to the banned terrorist group Lashkar-e-Taiba. And although the military regime professes pluralism abroad, it smashes free expression, free association, and free election at home. Today, Al-Qaeda is regrouping in Pakistan. Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, Abu Zubaydah, was arrested by the FBI through an intelligence operation from a house in the Punjab. Just before I came to Hillsdale, the FBI intercepted a satellite telephone conversation that led to the capture of another wanted terrorist, Ramzi bin al-Shib. The Pakistani intelligence services have yet to play a part in a single major arrest. The Pakistani military regime itself failed to seal the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan during the bombing of Tora Bora, which allowed Mullah Omar and other leaders of Taliban, as well as Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, to escape. The military dictatorship has a vested interest in prolonging the war against terror. It knows its significance comes so long as the war against terror exists. The day the war against terror finishes, the military regime knows that whatever international support it is presently getting will evaporate. So it is taking advantage of world opinion over Afghanistan to stage unconstitutional referendums, to rubber stamp its own dictatorship, to amend our constitution brazenly, giving unlimited dictatorial powers to the chief executive. And now they have issued retroactive decrees to prevent me from contesting the October parliamentary elections that observers had predicted I would win. The military dictator fears this one woman because he knows that the people of Pakistan share with me a dream of a Pakistan at peace with its neighbors, a Pakistan with freedom and free markets that allow its people to prosper. General Musharraf has exploited the war on terrorism to protect his dictatorship. Human Rights Watch this September called upon President Bush to make it clear that US support for Pakistan because of its role in the anti-terrorism effort does not give the military leader a blank check to abuse human rights and undermine democratic processes. Human Rights Watch further said, by undermining democratic institutions and restricting channels for political activity, Musharraf only helps the extremists in Pakistan. How many more September 11s? How many more Danny Pearls? Before we all come to realize that the greatest protection of freedom from terrorists is replacing dictatorships with governments responsible to the people, governments based on the values of democracy and liberty. My friends, I should not be here today. I should be free to campaign in the villages and towns of my country, but I'm stopped from doing so by special laws passed by decrees without sanction of the Constitution of my country. I would say history has taught us the very hard lesson that when America turns against democracy, it turns against itself. And that is why it is so critical in the war against terrorism that America keeps sight of its democratic credentials. Islamabad's generals are putting hopes on a different course. They're betting that the White House is so distracted by the violence in the Middle East and South Asia that it will backburner the cause of democracy. Maybe they are right. But if Pakistan's nuclear-armed military dictatorship is allowed to exploit the war on international terror to legitimize his own domestic reign of terror, the consequences of 9/11 will build like a tidal wave through this young century. I remember the words of John Kennedy, who said in his inaugural address over 40 years ago, "He who rides the back of a tiger usually winds up inside." A democratic Pakistan is America's best guarantee of the triumph of moderation and modernity amongst 1 billion Muslims who today stand at the crossroads of history. These are difficult times. Freedom is under assault. Democracy is under assault. Criminal terrorists hijack my religion, just as they hijack your planes. The solutions may not be quick or simple, but we will be strong, for we are determined, and freedom is a cause worth fighting for. I apologize for taking up so much of your time. I had wanted to finish earlier, but I will take my leave from you tonight with the words of George Washington, who said, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." And that's my dream, a world where there is none to make us afraid. Thank you very much.
I'll just let you lead the way.
You go ahead. You get the questions and I'll do the answers.
Oh, sure. Okay. We have time for a few questions. Hillsdale College student Stephanie Zimmerman has the microphone, so I'll let her pick someone out. Here we go.
Ms. Bhutto, earlier tonight you had spoken about wanting to prevent a clash of civilizations. If the United States tries to act with the United Nations approval to attack Iraq, in your opinion, would that help prevent a clash of civilizations?
Yes, I think that United Nations permission or going through the United Nations would be very welcome. I think certainly. I can understand the issues that President Bush has. He has a duty to protect the American people, and he sees a threat coming from Iraq. Here's the situation. The president needs to convince the other Muslim countries that this is an action that is being coming because of Iraq. Right now, there's a growing fear that after Iraq, there will be other Muslim countries. So I think the president did a great job last year in building up a consensus. And I think that consensus is the way that can make all of us understand each other as we pursue goals that can be similar. United Nations would also be an excellent way to move forward.
Madam Bhutto, knowing General Musharraf as you do, if the U.S. were to make action against Iraq, what would the reaction of the current leadership in Pakistan be?
I think General Musharraf would probably go with whatever the Arab League decided. Usually, traditionally, it's been that Pakistan decides what should happen in South Asia, and the Arabs support it, and we support what the Arabs want. He has said that he is reluctant about any action against Iraq, but I think when push comes to shove, it's an Arab issue, and whatever the Arab League decides will be the lead for the rest of the Muslim countries. The way I see it, as I said earlier, is that there is right now a kind of siege mentality within the Muslim world, and what's needed is an ability to reach out to the Muslim countries to reassure them that the situation with regard to Iraq, for example, is an isolated one rather than one of a chain of pattern where one country after another will fall. Having said that, I may add that I firmly believe in the United States supporting the democratization of Muslim countries. I would like to see the United States, which is a great democracy, help the Muslim people achieve freedom. The Muslim people want to see the United States on their side rather than on the side of the dictators. But I think one also has to move a step at a time.
You said that Islam is very friendly to democracy. Why then are there so few democracies that are Islamic countries?
That's a very good question, and it's a complicated and complex matter. There are different reasons why there are so few democracies within the Muslim world. Some of those reasons could be external. The fact that during the Cold War, the democratic movement of the Muslim countries, which had just gained independence from British rule, was rather subordinated to the highest geostrategic compulsions of the Cold War and keeping stable dictatorships in place while the war against communism was fought. And then there are internal reasons too, in the sense that there was a new state created in the 20s in Saudi Arabia, and the clergy there are very powerful and very moneyed. So they were able to spread what was their version or interpretation of the Islamic faith, which happens to be much more narrow than that more widely believed. So there was a mixture of reasons why Muslim countries could not achieve democratic government. I think Muslim countries need help, Muslim people need help, because they want their freedoms, they want governments that are accountable to them, they want to be able to freely compete for contracts and for jobs, and they don't have those freedoms. They see those freedoms on the television, they see it in America, they see it in Europe, and they feel deprived. It may be wrong, but then they see the association of their own regimes with Washington and they feel disappointed. This creates alienation. But deep down, the Muslim people admire the American way of life. Given an opportunity, each one of them wants to come here to this land of hope and opportunity, because there is religious tolerance here, there is equality here, education and opportunity.
Ms. Bhutto, I want to briefly ask you, what should be U.S.'s role to have fair elections in Pakistan at this time?
I think it's important for Washington to make it clear to General Musharraf that what's happening today is not elections. Elections mean the free participation of all political parties, the free participation of all political candidates. 40% of the candidates with regard to my party, including myself, have been banned from contesting in one form or another. Similarly, candidates from other political parties have been banned from contesting. This is not democracy. I'd like the United States to sit down with General Musharraf and tell him, you're our friend, you're our ally, but we'll be unable to give you the financial support and assistance that we're giving now unless there are free elections in Pakistan. We've got other goals in the rest of the world. This is a campaign for enduring freedom. And if you're our ally, you must also democratize.
Right over here, Minister. Just take a minute for the microphone.
Hi. Oh, that was all. Okay, I want to complete the latest question there. If you had to choose two countries out of the Middle East that are really democratic, most westernized in a democracy way, which will they be?
If I had to choose two countries within the Muslim world?
What happened? With the Middle East, you know, there are the two, like most westernized in a democratic way. Within the Middle East, you know, which will they be?
Well, I knew Hillsdale is a very important college that has the brightest students, and you flummoxed me right there. I'm not able to give you two countries, and I think that's maybe part of the problem. Okay,
one more question.
Over here. We are ignored here.
Do you think the United States should wait for the approval of Muslim countries before taking action against Iraq?
United States doesn't need to take anybody's approval today. It's got it's got the strength, it's got the political strength, the military strength, and the financial strength to go it alone. But I think that the United States could take the other countries into consultation, because winning over countries is also important. So I would prefer them to be more cautious and create that consensus. Thank you very much indeed, everybody here. Thank you and good night.